There are lots of interesting uses of the secondaries and the shapes. I mean, one task we mentioned is using a shape to track a subject if you have to obscure someone. So you just saw in that last exercise, you could put a shape on somebody's face, and within that shape, you could have defocused. What I wanted to show is some other techniques. So the idea of you can make compound shapes. This on this frame, for example, your tasks may be that you need to have some lighting here for this shape, and maybe a circle isn't going to do that. Maybe you have to hand draw that. So you have a drawing tool here. You could draw your own mat for this zone. Maybe you want to create an area here where this light has a different color in it. Oh, you know, it's like my bad template again. Okay, that I recreated at break. I recreated the template. So in my power grades is a new template. Apply the template grade, and now the node should link up. So if I do something, yes, it changes. If you're trying to do something and something seems wrong, look at the noodles, the way the nodes are, yeah, if they don't connect, you may have trouble. There's a couple ways to relight this. You can use secondaries to relight it. You could, primary, you might want to bring the density down. What's going on with the keyframe here? Okay, scopes. Scopes, you can find your scopes, workspace, video scopes on. And we don't have a lot of room. In my own practice, I have a separate monitor for my scopes. But here we're going to just use the parade scope for now, for real estate here. Okay, so very quickly, I might put a overall primary luminance correction on it there. I may want to put a secondary light here. Come on. Here's a trick or a catch. You know how we were defining that secondary. That eyedropper stays where you left it, so you have to put that eyedropper back to the qualifier on the selection range to get that to select. So I've got that. I'm just kind of moving really quickly here how you sometimes have to do as a working colorist. So I think that that's just a little too red or something. So I might get that as a secondary working on that zone there. Because I found that distracting. In terms of serving the narrative, one of my tasks as a colorist, that was distracting. What I might want to do here is have my audience pay attention to the subject in the frame. So I may want to track a light on his face and not have other things work. Now, so I made one secondary. I'm going to add another secondary to change the light back here. So to kind of create a dramatic conflict, I may want to have a different color light on the other side of the wall. So I sampled with the eyedropper. I have a hue width that's rather broad, so I'm going to narrow the hue width to 10, so it's more narrow. I'm going to soften that using the soft feathering of the hue variable. I'm clicking on and off saturation to see if it gives me more pixels. But the thing I find most effective is to use clean white. And that kind of expands quickly where that light falls. It kind of works like if you had used an actual light source on that, it's finding where the light is falling on those surfaces. Now what I would like to do is give that more of a cool fill. So I have a contrast of the warm exterior and the cool interior, perhaps suggesting some tension or conflict. I'm painting that into more of a strong hue. Now we have the task of, I want to get the boxer, the main subject, to light up a little bit. I go to the beginning of the frame, and now I go to shapes. I attach a circle shape. I could hand draw, but I won't. But you can do, rotomatting and attempt to track with that. But I find that a little tedious and cumbersome and kind of sloppy. But so I tend not to use that. I use those ovals because they're smoother and they're more like what a light would do. So I'm deleting all those tracking marks I did. I'm resetting my tracking. And I'm going to eliminate that. I'm going back to the window menu. I'm turning off the polygonic mat. I'm turning on the circle mat. And we're going to shrink that to the size of his head. So all those little points there are going to stay within his head. And I'm going to use his head as our tracking point. So I've attached the shape to an object. I select the tracker. I press forward. And I kind of hope that will follow him while I enjoy this cup of coffee. And it stopped. The tracker decided to interrupt my coffee break. So when it does that, you just have to restart it. So it's put all these tracking marks in here. You can continue tracking by playing it again and coaxing it along and it gave up again. And let's try it again. Yeah, this is one of the harder tracks to do. And then it just jumped down there. So I think that's probably the end of its effectiveness. So once having done that, I might then expand the shape. Soften it a lot. And within that, I'm just going to give it a little extra brightness. So in general, it's as if we had a light, and we're trying to track that light with him. More or less working. But for drama, we may want to defocus the shapes around it. So you can do, if you right-click on this and select outside, add node outside, then everything outside of him, more or less, it's very soft though, we could defocus that. So I'm going to the focus, which is this, and I'm going to take radius here all the way there. And now we have a kind of an interesting blurring around him. Now, I mentioned using shapes also for vignettes. I'm going to add another shape. I'm going to put a vignette in the picture because it's very modern and dramatic. And so center it, increase the size, increase the aspect out to the corners. You can leave it slightly soft, and then select the outside function. And then within the outside, in primary, you can darken. You know, that's a very strong, dramatic matte vignette. I prefer, personally, to feather that out to the point where my clients don't know I'm doing it. I said, did you put that vignette on? I said, yeah, I did. There it is. So we've come from this to this. In serving the narrative, we have added drama, a sort of emotional tension of the outside and the inside. There's a color conflict. There's tension there. The vignette itself sort of says there's an inside comfort zone and an outside threat or danger. It's murky out there. It's dark and soft focus. What could happen to me? The boxer is getting more of a light lift to stand out and separate. We can then further downstream here get into more interpretive drama. With the curve editor, I could make this a little more higher contrast in the ends there. The shadow just got deeper, and the highlight got a little hotter. And where the skin tones and face tones tend to live is right about here. I could give an extra boost in there to give that some zip. And then down here on the saturation node, because this is where I do my little eye doctor routine with the client, I offer them, using the memories. All right, I'm saving what I've done, option 2, that's up in memory B. Now I'm going to desaturate from 50 to 35, and I'm going to put that on option 3, and I'm going to go desaturate to 15, and I'm going to put that on option 4. And then I do the eye doctor routine, door number 1, 2, or 3. Sorry, let me give you full frame on that so you can see that. Scopes be gone. My first draft, my second draft, my third draft. And then you see if you're getting something that the filmmaker likes. So, and this is where you're going to do splitting differences. So, and I do things by number so I can orient the client or the filmmaker. This was 50, this was 35, and that's 15 units of saturation. That way they can say, well, I wanted 17 and a half. You know, that's our source. That's where we are now. To kind of further getting my footprints all over this, I'm going to go to NR, noise reduction. This is all by the way of the subject in my syllabus here is image enhancements. So noise reduction is usually meant to take out the temporal or the spatial grain or noise interference. If you had a low light camera and you wanted to get the granularity out of the shadows, noise reduction is good for that. If you find the star icon, this one gives you noise reduction. So noise can be in two places. It can be within the frame. We call that spatial. Or it can cross the frame, and that's where you have noise, the dancing pixels, the noisy pixels. Temporal noise reduction blends pixels across frames so that you kind of smear out the pattern of noise. You don't quite get it out. What might be interesting in a shot like this is that kind of blur, the focus blur that we did to the lights. Noise reduction might give a little texture, interesting texture to it. So I'm going to the spatial, and now I'm going to, on Luma noise, I'm going to put in a big number that's probably more than you'll need. And it's far too subtle, but if you look at the lamp, the lights, you see it's a bit noisy, and now I'm doing this. See how that's smoothing? This is off. Kind of choppy stuff going on there. This is on. The pixels are blended. That's not changing resolution. That's changing pixel edges. So you still have kind of the same resolution, but it's changed the texture a bit. Okay, so you can maybe see it better here. This is off. This is on. See how it sort of smooths the edges of transitions? And as I play it, okay, now I'm finding noise. So this is temporal noise here. This will be noise chattering across the frame. Let's now turn on temporal noise reduction. I'll do one frame worth, better, medium, small motion range, a very large number, just to test that. And it's playing along, and it's playing slowly because it has to cache. It has to go into cache memory. But I think you're seeing that noisy beam is a little smoother across frames. Now, what would I call this look? This is sort of frontline PBS, a current look that they're doing. And they're making these kind of a little more mysterious. This kind of look is helpful when you're doing reenactments, so that your reenactment doesn't look like the soap opera I was talking about. And there's a cinematographer in the U.S., Michael Chin. He does lots of things for the American Experience, and they do a lot of recreations. And he'll instead of showing you the whole room of Thomas Jefferson and his slave stenographer, it'll be Michael Chin will just focus in on the quill of his desk and his hands writing, and everything else is around it is shallow focus, and you have no idea really what's going on there. But the mystery and the atmosphere helps you accept that it's something from 300 years ago. There's a new History of China that's playing on PBS in the United States, and it has some looks, but I haven't figured them out yet. Okay, back to our program, and then the last note is trim, and this is where the client might say, well, interesting, Gary, but a little crazy. Can I see it bright again? And on the trim, that whole aggregate, that combination of all of that, I could add some brightness to that, and then the client filmmaker can see version 1 and version 2. And that being on the last node there does not affect all the other qualifications I did. Okay, another use of shapes I'm going to call up my Academy Awards show. There was a couple of problem shots in it, and that'll be the way to show those. So let's save that. What I want to show you is how to focus eyes and make those the main visual focus for a frame. So calling up, well, let's work with this person. The eyes are a little soft focus. Let's explore what we could do. Now, if I were, part of this thing is that I wanted to show you how to talk to a colorist, and perhaps you're living in Hong Kong and want to hire a colorist that's living in San Francisco. How would you tell them what you need done? You can have a project where you put marks. You put a marker in here. And this marker, I could type notes to the colorist. And you say your wishes. Speak your wishes. And try to use language like more contrast, better color balance, brighter face. Can you focus? Can you defocus background? And then were I to receive this project, I could then see all these notes, and in the edit index, I can have comments or markers. Right over here I can say show markers, and then in my edit list, then I have a list of all of your comments. So all of your instructions are there in a file, and then I could expand this out, and then I would take a screen grab of that, and then I have your orders. And they're per shot, and I can go marker to marker to marker and find what you want to do. And that's also another way to review a project. So if after I have performed a grade and I return you the color project, you again then open the QuickTime I made for you in Resolve in a timeline, and you send me a message. At this time code, nice. What were you thinking of? Do you need a doctor? I want my money back now. Okay, let's work on this shot.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we move on, is there a way to export those comments and marker so that it's easier to?
As a text file?
Yeah,
Yeah, there. It's in the manual. There is some way to export it. I did it once, and I told somebody how to do it, and I don't know where it is, but it's in.
But you can do it. So
You can do it. You can. If you can't.
The new version 14, many people can see.
14. You've opened 14. Whoa.
Can all see the same project at the same time, I think.
Yeah. I tried to download it and install it, and it crashed. So I'm waiting a little long.
Yeah.
Does it work for you? 14 works for you?
Yeah, it works.
Good, good. Well, I'll try it again.
Because all those notes will be very useful if many people is working on the same
Yes,
project.
yes. If you could share it with people.
Yeah, and the producer just type in and everybody can
Okay, they have caught on to it it's exactly what the industry needed, and they caught on to it. I've been using another application called Frame.io, and I put up a QuickTime, and I have the producer and the editor and everybody involved can then send me notes in the timeline. And I've been waiting for Resolve to do that. I didn't know they did that. Yeah. So hooray, that's great. Then we can have a collaborative. This is good. Yeah.
so much faster and many people working.
Yeah. Yeah. And then because they're sharing it, we don't have to send each other text files. Yeah. That's good. Hooray, I didn't know that. This is why I love what I do, because I learn something every day. And you guys have taught me 2 days worth of new things. So thanks a lot. Okay, let's find my template. It should be up there. Or I could load it that way, or the other thing I can do is take the entire timeline here from one. I think I showed this trick earlier today, but I'll do it again because some people came late. All right. Whoop. I've selected all shots in the timeline. I go up to my template. I apply grade. I leave the line. Now, I don't have to put a bunch of templates on everything. They're all there. I can start work right away. Back to this woman's shot. Okay, receiving the notes from the client. I'm going to start by turning on my scope again. I'll put my scope down here. Okay. This is Sony. Sony log. Let's put a LUT on it. Not too bad. Let's try 3D LUT from Sony. 3D LUT, Sony. Sometimes the LUTs are a good place to start. I'm going to keep that. I don't mind that at all. So you see up here there's a little icon that indicates you have attached a LUT. It's a series of little dots like that because what a LUT is, it's a map of color space, and there is inside the DaVinci application a LUT map. So every pixel in the color space that fits in that CIE 1931 color space I talked to you about, that's all mapped out. And when you hit that LUT, every point in that color space, your color correction influences all of those stations such that you will reproduce the map, a color map on each of these frames. So I'll start with the LUT, but I think it needs a little bit of white balancing. I'm using the panel to work a little faster. I think you learned yesterday which things I was controlling, but what I am working on is the primary. I'm just doing primary here, so I'm in those wheels there. So you'll see that they're changing. I am changing the gain wheel. I'm trying to level up the white. I've warmed up the picture a little bit. Black, I'm using lift. You see the lift numbers are changing a little bit. I'm just trying to flatten that a little bit. I'm going to lower lift slightly to the point where I am just touching the 0 line. That's as dark as I want to make it. And I'm lifting I'm raising with gain to where those are coming up, I'm seeing over here a clipping in the blue channel, and it's this. That's probably doing that. We'll get into that with secondaries. All right, so that I'm going to leave alone. I'm going to call that my primary grade. I'm going to use the secondary. This is color correcting still. I'm going to try to solve a color correction problem of clipping down. Okay, that's not. All right, I'm going to explore here. What's causing that clip? So is a high bright white, a high bright blue somewhere. Might be the one over her head. I will go to the curve editor on secondary here, and I'm going to disable, for soft clip, I'm going to select the blue only, and I'm going to bring down the blue channel. Not doing anything. Because I'm on secondary. Cancel my secondary. Reset node. Now try. Okay, see how the blue channel is now clipping down, and what's changing on the screen? It's this. That's a little out of range.
Sorry, what is soft clip again?
What soft clip is doing is it's taking, it's a frequency attenuation. There's a frequency up here, this very high, bright white blue. And Resolve is saying that signal is a certain value. Take that signal and bring it down. Only that signal. And in a sound mix, you could maybe take down a 10K sound and just attenuate 10K. So it's kind of like just chopping down that frequency, like a filter, like an EQ filter. That's kind of what it is. So in this case, I'm only doing it to the blue channel, but I could do it to all channels. If I bring down all of it together, you see the whites get a little dull. Not what I want to do. Too dull. All I want to do is with my secondary in technical color grade mode here, I want to just bring down blue out of clip. Oops. Sorry, just blue out of clip. Let's use secondary and define a skin tone. So the whole look here is sort of a bit on the cool side. For the narrative, we might want to have the skin tone warmer and the background cooler or something here. So we're making the human subject the most important part of the frame. I could put a circle oval on the face and brighten the face. We'll do that in shapes. But let's use a secondary. Let's find the woman's skin tone. When doing skin tones, the nose is your light meter. All the light around the room, this is receiving. Like if you go into a special effects company, put a gray mirror ball to map all the lights, your nose is the best thing in the frame to do that. It's receiving the most light angles. So click on the center of the nose. That gets your hue sample for the secondary color. Perhaps expand the width, soften that, perhaps expand clean whites, perhaps feather the low saturation softness. That gets you more transition. The shadow under the nose is not coming in, so I'm going to use my eyedropper and the additive eyedropper and put something under there. Okay, that did far more than I wanted to do. So I'm undoing that. And I see what affected what was luminance. I'm going to manually move high luminance down, or low luminance down. Okay, picking up a few more things there. Qualifying narrower width. Okay. Saturation. That's eyedropper. Okay, I will leave it at that. Let's try to trim out the hair color, which is a low luminance. I'm dragging the low luminance variable up. Okay, and then clean white, zeroing. I want to expand clean white. I'll get some of her shadow details. And then I want to isolate it to within the shape of her face. Okay, and were she to move, I would want to track it. She doesn't move very much, so I could probably get away by just simply softening the edges of that. Again, now I'm thinking of this as a light. I'm not changing her skin color, I'm changing the color of the light that is shining on her face. So that's why I've expanded that oval out to treat it like a light. Now, once it's there, you can trim the hue, or you can paint more color. I'm using the trackballs. Let me show you what I'm doing here. Okay, I'm going to go back to primary here. I'm going to take the gain and I'm going to move that over here, sort of overdoing it as far as painting the light in there, giving it an amber. And then I'm going to reduce the saturation of the light I just added. Perhaps to that. Perhaps 35. And perhaps a hue angle 51, 52. Now, things get a little political with face tones and skin tones. You, as a colorist, ask what your client wants, and everyone has a different idea of what they want. I've worked on a lot of documentaries with African Americans, and every filmmaker has a different impression. So solicit the view of your filmmaker. What does your filmmaker like? George Lucas does not like yellow. He does not like yellow skin tones. He liked everything pink. Just letting you know where he is. Not that he makes movies anymore. So, but the strategy here is what I'm trying to do is, for drama, I'm trying to make a warmer foreground. And I'm going to let blues and such things behind fall back. So now I'm going to create a counter, add outside node. And in that outside node, colors outside her face, I'm going to desaturate. And so now she's more pronounced. She stands forward a bit. I'm actually even going to give a little more of a blue cast to that background. And I'm clearly seeing problems with my matte. So I need to get more of her shadow in my secondary selector. So back to that secondary selector, click on the eyedropper, put a plus there. Right, so I've got a little more skin tone color to her light. With that outside window, you know, and this is a stylistic thing. I painted that blue in there. The client may not like it. Maybe they like it sort of normal. So here's where we get into decision making. I store this correction, option 2. I cancel out the primary shift that I did I'm canceling the RGB. And I'm storing that on option 3. And now I review with a filmmaker, did you like option 2 or do you like option 3? Option 2, option 3. I'm voting for 3. Now, I wanted to show you perhaps sharpening her eyes. I mean, they're pretty good, but what you can do in these situations with having just slightly sharper eyes than the rest of the picture, it puts your attention as an audience to the human subject in the frame. So how do you do that? You use shapes. You can track the eyeballs individually, but for today we're going to work a little faster. We're going to put the center of the oval on the bridge of the nose. We're going to take the size of the circle to 5, and we're going to make the aspect expand. Well, I'll do this by hand here. And rotation. So what I'm trying to do is track this. So what I'm doing is putting where the whites, the reflections in the eyes, I'm going to try to use those as tracking points. Because the distance between them will not change. The location in the screen may change, but her eyes are not going to go this way. So we're at the beginning of the shot, and I wasn't with my frame. All right, turn on the tracker, begin tracking. Okay, so that stays with her eyes. Now, soften the edges of the circle, go to your focus shape, and then raise the sharpness. You see how I've sharpened her eyes. I'll overdo it so you can kind of see. Now, it affects things like skin tone and such. That's what's being affected in there. You could just get it off of the skin tone if you go back to your secondary qualifier here and subtract the skin tone color with a negative eyedropper. I went too far. Okay, so what I've got left there is I've taken away the skin tone from the color. I went a bit far. I want more pixels and brightness here. I'll expand to highest illuminance, lowest saturation. Not working. All right, well. I think that's what I can get away with. Right, her eyes are somewhat sharper. I'm going to over-sharpen just for illustration. So the reflections in her eye are now a little sharper. Another political issue is skin tone detail and sharpening. You can help or harm people. I'm going to add a little temporal noise, or spatial noise reduction, just to show you what might happen smoothing out skin tone. Did you see what that did? This is a lot. This is off. This is on. But spatial noise reduction can blend pixels within the color that we selected of the, so only those colors are getting spatial correction. If you have somebody who is concerned about their complexion, this helps some. I have a director in San Francisco of a certain age, and most of the work I do for her is skin tone defocusing. I won't say who that is, but that's selective. That's another thing you could do. Another.
The temporal
Yeah.
threshold is like the smearing.
Temporal will blend over time. So if there's noise dancing across frames, a temporal will blend this frame with this frame's pixel. They make a hybrid pixel that has less motion. You observe less of a phenomena of noise over time. Spatial is within the frame. So in this spatial correction I did, I'm just changing the pixels within the frame. So the pixels within her face color, her face tone, are blending some. Spatial is in frame, and temporal is across frame. Yeah. We did qualify that shape. So within that circle, we could sharpen the whole face. So the eyes are sharpened even more than the face here. This shapes was the one that I used to sharpen the eyes. We may not need that anymore now that we've sharpened the whole face. So I'm turning off the eye sharpening. This is now face sharpening. And the rest of the frame behind the face can be blurred. I'm sort of overdoing it, but that shows you can create shallow focus in shots if you hadn't done it. When in the human form, when you're doing this sort of sharpening, you may want to make shapes that are compounds. So, for example, besides the face, you may want to have a circle for the body. So that both the body and face are sharpened. And you may want to feather out the shape. I have two of these here. And if you're very particular, if you wanted her hair in focus as well as the face, then you would have to hand draw. And that would require putting in the polygon one and adding adding frames to the contour. Yeah.
Is it possible to import articulated mattes from, like, say, After Effects?
Yes, you can put it through the external mat.
Can you show us how to use it?
Yeah. Better to do on our third day. I've got, part of my lesson is green screens and composites and adding mats. So, and I've made a mat for one of those. I made an external mat for a particular subject, and let's do that then. But the concept is, and you could, yeah, if you had created your mat in After Effects and generated it, you would go to any one of these nodes. And over here on the keyer is a place where you can work with external mats. And you would go to the node, right-click on the node, and down at the bottom is something called Add Mat. You would add the mat, and you would add an alpha channel. And then the alpha channel would let that mat composite here. So
You export just a simple MOV or MP4 from After Effects, and then import it in the media pool?
yeah, it'd be great if it had an alpha channel. Make sure it has an alpha channel. Yeah, 4444. Yeah. But yeah, then you can get very exciting looks and such.
Because the hand-drawn shapes is different.
I hate doing it. I hate making hand-drawn shapes and then this. So. I had a particular narrative documentary that they called me at the last minute. It was a bunch of green screens, and they used. We talked about 420 media. It was standard definition green screen 420, and we had very edgy mats. So with standard definition, we blew it up to HD, and it was, I didn't have even, and that was difficult. I wish I had time to have an effects artist make articulated mats. But I had to go with what I went in a short time, and I used the green screen keyer function in here.
So if you imported a mat like After Effects, would it still automatically track?
Would it automatically? Well, it's what you export from After Effects has the tracking baked into it. So that's the thing about Resolve and After Effects. They're not interactive yet. Resolve is trying to get you to use their program called Fusion. And I find that really clunky. It's someday if the industries, one company may have to buy the other one. But if Adobe and Resolve would settle into what they're good at, if Adobe would say, we're the editor and we're the After Effects company and you're the color corrector, now let's shake hands and get along, then Resolve wouldn't be chasing a really bad keyer. But that isn't happening. Okay, so that's a draft on this. Okay, and I wanted to show you other enhancement tools. The other enhancement tool I haven't talked about is stabilization. This can stabilize. It's not great. It's not great. You've probably stabilized in whatever editing application you have. Yeah, that's just as good. I'm going to show you a shot where I couldn't fix something. It was shot in Africa, and you see the rolling bar behind his head? The lights are 50 cycle, and they shot it 60 cycle with the camera. And that is something I've never figured out how to fix. If you know of a plugin let me know. But our solution for the movie at the Oscar is I did a hand roto. Anyway, we cut him out, and we put a still. We took a freeze frame, and we composited that. So what we left, I drew around his head, and I drew around his head, and then the rest of the room we made a freeze frame. And so he moves, but the room doesn't, and the lights don't roll in there. So I kind of fixed it that way, but I wouldn't say I did it with a color correction. So some of you have been editing in Final Cut 10 or Premiere, and you have a project that's already in work, and you would like to work with that footage, and you brought it into the workshop the other day, and you just have your clips. Now you can color grade those clips, but how are you going to get those grades back to your project? What you can do, you continue to work with your project, and you can store your grades in the Power Grade in your application, and then you can bring in your final edit. What you would do is take your Premiere, your Final Cut 10 project, and you would generate a single QuickTime of your movie. Remove the text, no titles. Remove any color correction you might have done in your other application, if you'd done work in Premiere or Final Cut 10. And export an EDL. And I'll show you now how we can maybe import that in. So this movie, we made a QuickTime. So I have all the media in here, and it might not all connect. So we're going to start fresh. Saving this, back to the directory, new project. It's down here, Gary. New project. Let's call it EDL Scene Detect. Okay. You were editing, and you brought over your project. In your folder, you have a media directory on your project. I brought mine in training, and it's in, should be the Oscar show. Yes, it's the Oscar show. Add media into media pool. Different. Okay, in this case, I want the frame rate of the QuickTime to govern the DaVinci project, so I'm changing that. Now, I go to Edit, and I go to File. Okay. Oh, I did that wrong. I don't want to bring in this media yet. I'm going to eliminate that media for now. Remove selected clip out of the directory. Now, try that again. Go to that file, add into scene cut detection. This launches another way to mark your list. I could play this file now, and it would find all the cuts. But the other way to go is to mark the cuts by an EDL. It's up here. Up here. It's not terribly obvious, is it? There's nothing saying, look over here, Gary. Load EDL. It doesn't really give you a chance to change this, so you pretty much have to obey these orders. So, okay, now it's going to go look for it. Where did I put it? It should be in my folder. My EDL should be in this project training. Lots of movies here. EDL. Well, good labeling, Gary. Open. Please select conform rate. Will it give me a choice? I'd like 23978, but it didn't give me. So it's giving me 24. I'll take it. Okay. Preserve scene cuts, preserve. That is the Oscar show. All cut up by the EDL decisions that were made in the Premiere project. Click on Add Cuts to Media folder. So there are here 100 cuts, and now they're added in that media directory. Now you can close this. Now you're looking in your edit bin, and okay, well, I'd rather your media bin. There should be some media there. Okay, I could have swore I put some media in here, but we'll know in a moment. New timeline. Go to the Edit tab. New timeline. Deselect empty timeline. Create. You stinker. All right. Maybe I didn't hit that Add Media button correctly. Let's try it one more time. Huh. Yeah, it's a little tricky. Add scene cut list. They're there. Add cuts to media pool. There they are. Sometimes when you hit a button, you have not hit a button. All the media is there. The edit is not populated yet. Go into new timeline. And so it's going to take all that media bin and it's going to just load this in and shot over. So select empty timeline. So it will look into the media directory and pull it all in. Create, and there's the movie. So if you've been working in the other room and you found some color correction work that you would like to preserve, you could go to your power grade and retrieve it and paste it into the work that you've already done. Let me show you what it would have looked like if we hadn't brought in the EDL, if we just tried to do a scene, because some of you don't have EDLs, so there's another way you can in scene detect. So let's save that. So I'm going to create yet another project. So that media's already been cut up, and then the scene detector might mess it up again. So new project. Oh, save your work, save project. New project. Scene cut, scene detect. Spelled differently. Great. All right. Nothing going on. You have your basic system configuration in place, and that's telling us it's 20. Let's make it 25 for now. Save. So your default configuration will come up and it'll load that. Try to have the same frame rate in the timeline as your media. So now I'm going to find that Oscar show. I'm going to add to scene cut detection. Wait a minute. I don't want that. I'm going to delete all of that. Make that go away. Huh. I wasn't expecting this. It seems to have stored all of my EDL cuts, so I need to avoid that. Well, we'll try a different way. Well, I'll bring in a different movie. So instead of the Oscar show, I will bring in the Women's March. This is the one I worked on. It's shot in 5 different towns, 5 different cameras. Add into media pool, no, scene cut detect. Auto scene cut. All right, this may take a little while, but it's going to go through this movie, and it's going to find scene transitions. And what may be difficult here is when it fades to black, it fades up for black. Scene cut sometimes sees each step of a fade as a cut. That's unfortunate. And the other potential problem with this, in animation especially, is sometimes the scene cut will see a frame and it keeps counting that frame over and over and over again. And like on a countdown, the sweep of the 2, the countdown is coming down to 3 o'clock, and it'll make the 3 o'clock frame 2 or 3 times. So that's a little annoying. But this is what you can do if you don't have an EDL. But to make your life easier, while you're editing, export EDLs and XMLs, particularly if you're using Final Cut and Premiere. Because what you're going to do, if you've used an EDL or an XML, is you can round trip back to your application. So when we're delivering our work, when we're all done with our color corrections and we're ready to deliver, we will render out each individual shot with a 24 or 48 frame handle. You are generating new media with a revision of the media's original name. When it's all rendered, in the render folder is an XML. The XML, when opened in Premiere, gives you back your project with all your edits where they were, except that the Premiere is going to look at, instead of your source media, the new media you created with the Resolve render. Your project opens up, and then you have your color corrections. The student who is not here at present wanted to be able to make a round trip to her Final Cut 10 project, and that's how we would have done that. The Women's March was shot on 5 or 6 different cameras. Some I got log, and some I got DSLR, really crunchy. That interviewer, that's a Native American woman on the left there. I think she had Sony. This woman is a Persian, no, she's an Afghan woman who came to the United States during the Russian-Afghan war, and her family has lived in the United States since that time and is now subject to, possible removal, even though they were born in the United States. This is the San Francisco March. My movie looks awful. I used an iPhone. It was raining, and I'm following some of those people, and it's, just because you're a colorist doesn't mean you can shoot. And my footage is proof. Now we're in black here. The end there, it doesn't seem to have stopped playing. But for now, I'm going to stop and I'll add cuts to media directory. Okay, add cuts. Now it's telling me clip has a different rate than the current project. Change this. Let the project now be the same speed as the media. The change. I see files down there. Let's close the window. Let's go back to edit. We have media in the media directory. We need a timeline, a new timeline. Click empty timeline so it imports what we've got. You can change the starting time to be the same as you want, but I'm going to make it 1. Create. All right, now we have a list. You can see on these frames I'm getting those. The scene detector counted the fade from black as individual frames. So that is a little sneaky. Now, here's a trick. At Shift Command F, this is called Lightbox. You can see the entire film as a film strip. You can, when it's all graded, do a screen capture, and it makes a very interesting possible poster for your film. But where I find this useful is I can then see I have this subject here, so what grade I do here, I may want to go and apply there.
You can actually do grading in this page, isn't it?
Can you? I never tried, but yeah, you can. So I just did a grade on that, and I saved it, and now I'm turning off. And I have that in memory. So yes, you can. You could do that. And you could, so now that I have that in memory, if I had it in still, I have it as a still. Now let's call that back up again. There she is, Command 2. I've pasted the grade. Here she is again, Command 2. The grade's wrong, but the copying's nice. Yeah. So that is one way to grade your movie. You could see your whole movie at a glance and then jump around and find your interview and do that interview and then do that other interview and quickly get around. And if you got a feature documentary with 1,000 cuts and they only gave you 1 day, that helps. So somebody had talked about matching cameras. Let's go to a scene where it cuts from one of the city demonstrations to another. This woman is in Washington, D.C. Okay, she's in Washington, D.C. That's one interview camera, and here she is in the rally. She's an environmental scientist for the federal government and was on the march protesting. She may lose her job. Okay, let's start by going to Power Grade to retrieve the template. Once again, I could take the entire timeline and apply the template to it, but I'll just do it here for now. I'll do it for this kind of whole sequence here. And we'll apply the template. So we have a problem here with, okay, in the field, they had log. In the interview, they didn't. let's try to make those reasonably match to suggest they were the same camera. And here we have stock footage. This is from a news feed. And our next president, Kamala Harris, is here. And she's on a news feed. So that's yet another camera. So we might try to homogenize these looks. Okay, let's start with this. Again, it's log. Let's see if a LUT will help us. It was a Sony. Let's go to the Sony 3D LUT. This is log. Let's find a log to Rec 709. I don't hate it. I think that's kind of nice. Let's turn my scope back on. Okay, so again, adding a little contrast. Here's an interesting function of the curve editor. When I see people who's maybe a little brighter than other people, the curve editor sometimes lets you get a little more tonal modulation in a skin tone. You know, more of a variation of highlights and such. So I may use a memory here, memory 2. Oh, no, but I want to use a still store. So let's grab a still. Option Command G is still, and they're up here somewhere. So again, sometime get a screen capture of all your hotkeys to make your life more pleasant. Okay, so I have a still there. I want to go to the other camera and see if I can match these up a little closer. So, I'm more or less creating a similar contrast ratio. Screen right is more saturated than screen left. I may decide to go back to screen left and attach more saturation there. Screen left is daylight color balance. Screen right is a tungsten lit interior. I might counteract some of the tungsten by cooling screen right. I'll leave saturation alone on screen right because I think that's sort of nicer. Let's go back to screen left. Oh, while I'm here, let's get a still of screen right. Here's screen left. I'm playing the still. I'm going to invert by hitting Option W, so they're arrayed like that, and I split the screen more like so. So screen left now, perhaps more saturation. Going to the saturation designated node, increasing saturation to that, maybe a bit more. The daylight is still a cooler color than the tungsten light. I may want to white balance the screen left a little more. So let's put that let's do that more subtly using the primary bars. Primary bars, I'm lifting. Oh no, let's use offset. Offset is Mr. Subtlety itself. That's 1 degree of red. A half a thing of red. No, that's not doing it. So what I want to do is get the gain. We're going back to primary bars. The gain side, the highlight needs to get warmer more than the rest of it. So here comes more red and green light to the daylight there. And we increase saturation. I think we're a little closer in our look. There's a lot of pink reflection going on from the hats and such. We may want to get into her skin tone and find, go to the qualifier, select the active qualifier, select the hues, and perhaps take the hue more toward tan or yellow, changing that. So now I think we've got something where the cameras look a little more like each other. And chiefly, the difference in the camera is often contrast ratio and contrast curves. So the detail and shadow might be more compressed in one than the other. DSLRs really kind of give you a coarse shadow. So sometimes with the DSLR, bending the curve up in the shadow will help you match with Sony's. Okay, well, let's just, we kind of jammed through using Resolve. I want to make sure we taught you what you needed to do. Using Resolve, the database, the idea with the database is when you install Resolve on your computer, the application is in its own library, it's creating a database. So all these projects that you make are going to be living there. Add users. On that main page when you first launch, you can add individual people if you're in a multi-use area. Resolve preferences. Up here under preferences are various choices. You could elect to use one of the different control panels. You can decide if you were using red, who uses red? But you could decide how your red files are produced. What this is telling me, the Ultra Studio Express, that is a device to get your signal out of Resolve computer into monitors, external monitors. So one of these monitors, probably this one, is getting the Ultra Studio Express. Media storage, you could add different RAIDs and places to store things. Yeah, not much more to that. So preferences, project settings, let's review that with a little more detail. So each project is governed by project settings. And this page comes up, and there are presets, and one is the system configuration that DaVinci Resolve gave you. Your current project has one. You can create your own. I created one called Basic, and so you can make them and save as and create your own. Every individual user could have their own. You can always use system configuration and load that to get back to what is essentially a default. Okay, let's review that again. So here's project settings. It gives you a timeline resolution. Now, were you working with 4K files? You could bring in your 4K files, and you could use those as your timeline resolution if you like, but they're hard to see on 1920 by 1080 monitors. So you might want to leave your timeline resolution at 1920 while you're working with your 4K things, unless you've got a 4K monitor somehow. The timeline frame rate will be determined by the media that you bring in, or the EDL you bring in, or the XML you bring in. When you're given a choice, like when you brought in the media yesterday, it probably prompted change to the source or not. We elected yesterday to leave it unchanged because we didn't actually have an edit project. It's going to default to 24, but in this country it should be 25. The image processing is floating point is, so we talked about it yesterday, however your media is coming in, if you've got 8-bit, 12-bit, 10-bit, the color processing by DaVinci Resolve is going to use the highest level of color space that it can give you. So very, very subtle transitions in color can be processed at 32-bit floating point. We talked about color science. We want to leave that at DaVinci YRGB. Color managed is useful to protect you from, if you're using HDRX files, that's high dynamic range files. This will hold you into something that is viable for displays. ACES is an Academy's color management system for studios. Okay, enable video processing. If you have interlace material, you might want to select and enable video field processing so your interlace frames blend better. I don't know, do you have interlace footage? Or you're probably all in progressive by now. But if you were, you might want to select that. And your various video formats, you should be set to be the same as the monitoring devices. So these should all be on progressive, segmented, or in this room, I think we're meant to be at 1080i 50. Video bit depth of your monitor, you can pick what you have. Image scaling, don't worry about that. Editing, don't worry about that. Color, yeah, not your problem. If you had different cameras with RAW, you could select the particular RAW format you're using. Color management, this is if you wanted a LUT to govern your timeline. Let's talk about gamma. Gamma is the contrast function of your monitor and in the ambient light environment you're working with. People working with computers in bright ambient light like offices should use a gamma of 2.2, because that accommodates for a contrast of the display to work better with the ambient light that's spilling around. This is correct studio lighting, so we would go with 2.4 Rec. 709 gamma. So these monitors are now making a contrast display appropriate for this environment. Were you in a cinema grading environment, you would want 2.6. Which it's not letting us do. It's giving you a lot of other choices. Rec, 2020, the ultra high def. There really ought to be a 2.6 in here. Oh, okay, up here you got P3. You can use P3 DCI if you're grading in a cinema environment. Some people have asked me about calibrating your monitor. Calibrate your monitor for Rec. 709, but this timeline color management can vary with whatever your environment you're in. What else are LUTs? Don't worry about that. Let's get that scope back up. Now, DaVinci did not give us an actual video scope. They gave us a 10-bit scope, so we can measure from 0 to 1023. But when they list their broadcast limiter, they're talking about a number that is below the scale. So down here, if this is 0 in 10-bit, it is also 0 IRE on a video scale. And the video scale has 10 brackets. So as close as we get to having something that can work as a video scope, up here is 100 IRE. In luminance only, 100 IRE is the maximum brightness you can make your signal and have it telecast. When we're talking about chrominance, that's the color information on top of the black and white image carrier. That can go to a number called 120 IRE. It would be up here if this scope showed it. And it points after that is where you start interfering with the audio subcarrier. So unfortunately, we do not have a way to accurately measure IRE on this. Not that it matters, because you're going to, in your project settings, click that broadcast save. And you're going to trust that DaVinci Resolve will take care of you. So just make sure that you do that. Anything else here? It is in this environment that you could generate your own LUTs too. So you may be working with effects artists who want you to send them a LUT. You would have to, this is more cumbersome than you'll probably ever do, but it's in the manual, and in the application is a LUT map stored in the DaVinci Applications folder. You would bring that into your timeline, you'd make your color correction, and then you would generate a LUT out, and that LUT could then go to the After Effects technician or artist, and they would have a way to kind of get an idea of a grade. Sometimes a director wants to just come in once and say, I want it to look like this, generate a LUT and give that to the After Effects person. So it would be, that's if you're working with somebody's in After Effects and you're in Resolve, generating a LUT is one way to get over that. Anything else here? Okay, good enough. And another thing in general options was the Create Smart Bins. If you select that, then if you have multiple timelines, like I do in this one, I can go to Edit and I can click on Timelines, and now I have my bins, and I can rapidly get to the different timelines I did. I think that's enough about project settings. Saving projects in databases, you understand how to save your project. One aspect of saving your project is you may want to export it. So when you've saved it, you've kind of saved it in the database. You may want to get it exported out to a drive somewhere. So it could live in a folder. I put all of my stuff in Dropbox and have it up in cyberspace. So I could retrieve projects that I worked on, and bring them in today. So, and what happens when you export your project is all those stills you've made in your gallery. If we're over here, if you select here in the directory and you right-click on this, you can export with stills and LUTs. So that is another way. That's another way to conserve your corrections. So that would come up with your stills. Okay. And back up your database at least once a year. Anything else there? I think that's... Oh, I put this in here. Yes, you can colorblind. If you're colorblind, you can color grade. Because if you use that eyedropper, you can find the name of the color. This is on my website on a link called Name That Color. So this lists all, if you put the eyedropper on the screen, that lists those RGB values, and then you can find the name of, and if you're colorblind and your client wants you to make cornflower blue, you can do it.